evening. How's everyone doing? My name is Richard Morales. I'm the manager of cultural programming here at the LGBT Community Center. For those of you that aren't aware, we do offer a variety of programs which you can find out on our website, gaycenter.org. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, please do so. I'm going to pass this on to Matt from Upper Project.
Hello. Thank you, Richard, and thank you to everyone at the center for inviting us here this evening, and of course for all of the incredible work that you do in providing and promoting health, wellness, and community connection in our vibrant LGBTQ+ community. I am Matthew Gray. I am the General Director of the American Opera Project, an organization in Brooklyn, New York, that is dedicated to creating new works of lyric theater. And I am thrilled to welcome you here tonight, to have you here in person and at homes across the world to celebrate the International Transgender Day of Visibility. In 2014, AOP had the privilege of premiering a 75-minute chamber opera called As One. As One was written by composer Laura Kaminsky and co-librettists Mark Campbell and Kimberly Reed. In an extraordinary short amount of time, we were surprised to see As One go on to be performed in 28 states here in the US and in Washington, D.C., and to be performed by 68 singers in the role of Hannah. The role of Hannah, As One, is an opera about Hannah, a transgender woman. She's portrayed by two singers, and she's accompanied on her journey of self-discovery by a string quartet, and then behind her is an original film created by the multi-talented Kimberly Reed. Tonight we're here to talk about As One, to think about As One, but more importantly, to talk about the changes in our society in the 7 years since it has premiered, to talk about what has changed in the visibility of transgender and non-binary people, of the artistic representation, and how much more we still have to do. I'm going to start by giving you a sample of As One. It's a sample from the world premiere recording that we did in 2014 at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. It features Sasha Cook and Kelly Markgraf in the role of Hannah. It's a production directed by Ken Kazan with Stephen Osgood conducting the Fry Street Quartet. Enjoy.
Like every other boy, I had a paper route. And like every good boy, I wake each morning, ride my bike around with my jacket on, and enjoy the thump of a well-aimed paper as it lands. However, unlike every other boy, I sometimes wake extra early while everyone's asleep. Ride my bike around with my jacket on and a blouse underneath. The blouse I stole from a neighbor's clothesline. It isn't much, but fits my 12-year-old frame. And just feels so right. We have been separated by gender to learn about sex. Must be the perfect boy, the fastest, the smartest, the strongest, the best. When I see her on TV, there she is, and I hear the word, the real word, the magic word. Finally, a name for this. That is me. That is my word. There are others. There are others to learn. I'm not the only one. The relief, the power, just know, just to know.
Dear friends, both in person and online, welcome to the center here in Brooklyn, and to As One, the work continues. My name is Rahzé Cheatham, and I am a baritone, model, and creative director, currently based in Baltimore, Maryland. My pronouns are they, them, and theirs. And it's such a great pleasure to be with you today on this most auspicious occasion, the Transgender Day of Visibility. Joining me today, I have some very special guests that I'm very eager to introduce you to. First, the esteemed Kimberly Reed, a filmmaker and co-librettist of As One. We have baritone Lucas Bouk, who is as dashing and blue as anyone. And the ethereal mezzo-soprano Heather Jones. Now, as much as I'd love to sit here and compliment how wonderfully beautiful I find all of them, let's get to the heart of the matter and talk about As One. I was recently part of the 49th production of As One with the Lowell Chamber Orchestra in November 2021, where I performed alongside mezzo-soprano Tona Brown. And this was a particularly wonderful production, not only because we uplifted it on the Trans Day of Remembrance, but also because in 49 productions, it was the first time that As One was able to be performed with an exclusively gender-expansive cast, while also having a gender-expansive stage director and a number of trans and agender and gender non-conforming people in the crew, too. So it was a wonderful feeling to be surrounded not just by highly ambitious artistic professionals, but people part of my very own community. And on the subject of community, I want to talk about kind of where As One began. And Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit about As One's kind of original conception and your part in its conception?
Yeah, thank you. Is this on? Now it's on. I'm Kimberly Reed. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you for such a lovely introduction. That was fantastic. It's a lot of us are meeting each other in person for the first time, so it's a special occasion. You know, composer Laura Kaminsky usually tells this story, so I'm going to try to tell it because the story really starts with Laura, who had the idea that she wanted to write an opera about the trans experience. I'm going to abbreviate this a lot because we all need to talk, but basically Laura, I think, had that in mind. She saw a film I made about me being trans and going home for the first time in a long time in that process of coming out, and it gets really complicated because there's all this stuff with my family that sort of usurps me being trans, which is kind of cool because even though we are trans and that's a big part of our identity, that's not all we are, and that's just one aspect of who we are. And Laura saw that and wanted to make this opera and approached me to be part of that. And I had not worked in opera before. Laura met the esteemed Mark Campbell sitting here in the first row. And then, you know, Mark is a very renowned librettist. And before too long, we were working on that together, which was a big step for me. It was also Laura's first opera, so Mark was helping us kind of learn the opera world, and that's where it all started. As with Prodigal Sons, I think a lot of the sort of roots of As One come from personal experience, like I think a lot of art needs to. But Mark and I really tried to find ways to kind of broaden that experience, fictionalize that experience to give us greater depth and capacity, gives the ability to talk about parts of the trans world that maybe weren't my direct experience, but being someone in the trans community could really, you know, appreciate and want to portray aspects of the larger trans experience without ever claiming that this is like every trans story or this big universal thing. And I think that's my time to like kind of sign off because I've hit my limit.
Please, Lucas.
I also just want to point out that the film that you saw is Kim's work that comes with the production and is a big part of the show, not just the two actors, but there's also this beautiful cinematography behind us when we're performing. And it's been a really wonderful experience being immersed into Hannah's narrative in that way, and that is Kim's creation.
Charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent. Consequently, I wanted to just briefly touch on something. You mentioned your Prodigal Sons, which, for those who are unfamiliar, is one of Kim's kind of breakout works as a filmmaker that is as educational as it is autobiographical, is as beautiful as it is expansive in its storytelling. And in it, you kind of reconcile that with your brother, Mark, that you have this strange relationship that your identity did not exactly serve to amend, right? And although you still have this great love for your family and for your brother, I'm wondering the ways in which we can kind of draw a parallel between your experience with the people who are supposed to love you, you know, the most unconditionally. How can we, as a community, enlist the love and support of others if it's still yet so difficult to form those bonds with those who are close to us?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Today, it's a big day because it's Trans Day of Visibility. It's also, this is going to be tough. Believe it or not, it's my brother Mark's birthday. It would have been his birthday. He passed away in 2010. So there's a lot going on emotionally today. So I just want to put that out there for my brother Mark, whom I miss every day. Yeah, you know, my relationship with my brother Mark was extremely complicated, and there were times where he, you know, just, and I even hate using this word, but accepted me. I think I put it in those terms because I think that's how he thought about it. I saw that as, I think, just a challenge in a lot of ways. Like, it would have been really easy for me to just dispense with that relationship. But I mean, you know, I started out making this movie about me going home to Montana and being trans, and, you know, you can kind of imagine where that goes just with that setup. That's not where it goes. It goes in crazy directions. My brother finds out that as he was adopted, he's related to these crazy famous people, and we kind of each have these new identities that are kind of like swirling around each other, and it becomes this interesting, I think, discussion about whether you can reconnect with your siblings in adulthood, having, you know, grown into something else, having become who you are. And yeah, so if anything, I hope the movie is about that love, about trying to find it. It's really hard sometimes in families, almost always. But I think it's about that constant quest to try to get there.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said about how having a voice and being able to see oneself can go a really long way. But of course, you know, for those opera lovers out there, we know that Mozart and Beethoven and all of our other BFFs from Germany didn't write for the trans voice. And so I'm curious, and this can be for any of our esteemed panelists, but the trans voice, what does that mean? What does that sound like? What does that look like? And what are some common misconceptions we might dispel today?
I've been thinking about this a lot. Before the pandemic, I had a career as a mezzo-soprano and performed the mezzo-soprano role in this opera. But during the pandemic, I've transitioned, and I'm now a baritone. So I've been thinking a lot about what does trans voice mean, and I like the term trans voices in terms of a collective, like of transgender people, our voices must be heard. But in terms of like the actual voice is not gendered. Like my arm is not gendered. Mm-hmm. The microphone doesn't have a gender. It is a voice. It is an instrument. And I think, you know, not enough transgender singers have transitioned or are in a place, you know, socioeconomically and in terms of kind of where transgender healthcare is in our nation, to have had the opportunity to train as opera singers. What I'm trying to say is I think as we move forward, we're going to see all different kinds of transgender singers with beautiful voices and that are suited for all different kinds of things. Opera, musical theater, trans voices deserve to be heard.
Absolutely. Heather?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I echo all of that, and I am a non-binary agender is a term that Rahzé uses that I really like the taste and feel of. So I'm debuting it tonight. I'm an agender person, and yeah, in so much music. So I feel that so much of my work is re-educating people based on language, and I sing a fair amount of choral music, which is incredibly gendered, and there's absolutely no reason to refer to people by gender. We are instruments. Singers are instruments. You would never call a group of violinists girls and boys, and yet singers are called girls and boys all the time. And referring to people by their instrument is something that I have kind of accidentally taken on as the hill that I will die on. And along with dress, again, instrumentalists are kind of, their instrument speaks rather than them. So a lot of times it's just, oh, we're all black. And for singers, oftentimes it's men wear this, women wear this. And if you're anything else, I guess you don't come to the concert. Yeah, and so also within the realm of opera, so much of the beautiful canon of music is incredibly gendered, and the stories are incredibly gendered, but that doesn't mean that the singers need to be. And something that I observe is that, like, thanks. Something that I observe is that the binary is not inherent. We see the binary in art, and I've experienced this before I felt comfortable coming out. I felt that I needed to match the roles that were available to me in order to be hireable. And lucky for me, mezzos get to sing boys and girls and creatures and children. So I had a lot to play with and a lot of drag to be playful with. But I know a lot of baritone roles are, cranky men. It's not an expansive playground in the way that the world is an expansive playground for gender. And yeah, the more that comes out in art, the more it will give back to humanity too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, excuse me, and I'm wondering more specifically, and maybe this conversation can illuminate for even ourselves that we don't have all the answers. What are some actionable resources, some actionable steps do you think that we can take to rectify, basically the gendering of instruments where there need not be one? It sounds like on one hand, some personal responsibility, right? But it's very easy to take on individual responsibility for systemic failures. So I'm wondering, how might we release that burden just a little bit as individuals and maybe more collectively address that issue?
One thing that Laura, Mark, and I decided to do is, at the front of the score, when you're describing the dramatis personae, the cast of characters you're going to have, we just decided that we weren't going to describe them in a way that's not gendered. We're going to describe them, like you're saying, according to voice type, and who cares who has that voice type, where it comes from. It's just about these are the instruments that need to be used.
So part of it, I think, what I'm hearing is that it can fall on the creative professional to boldly take that stake, right, and make that claim and say, well, in the first place, Poulenc is gone, Debussy and Schoenberg are gone, but we can still just write voice next to the Stimme. We can just write voice, and the person who has the instrument can fill in that role. But of course, that also presupposes that the companies that would bring in this work or the audiences who would view this work are prepared to accept that as well. So it's definitely, I think, a wonderful, not even first step, series of first steps in the right direction. Now, it's not lost on me that I'm the only black person on this stage, and I'm sure it's not lost on you either. And although I'm a hardworking person, although I'm an ambitious person, I find that oftentimes in especially professional spaces, my proximity to whiteness makes my more radical ideas more palatable. Or because people hear my gentle crooning voice, or see my hair or see my skin, they're more prone to maybe listen to me. And of course, that is triply or quadruply true for my white counterparts. So, panel, I'm wondering, could you illuminate us to ways that even as you begin to take up space in a world that is historically marginalizing you, what steps are you taking to protect others who are at further risk in the same environment?
I can go. Just one. I mean, one very simple step is to vote and advocate for policies that support the Black community, that support transgender healthcare, and make those things available to try to even the playing field from very basic needs. So that's just something very simple. Other things are also just doing your own research and looking at groups like the Black Opera Alliance has done an incredible job of advocating for the Black community in opera, and I reading through their statements, looking at what they're doing, and then passing that information on. There's some very simple steps.
Absolutely. Heather?
Sure. The ways that I think of it are kind of like institutional, local, and professional, or personal, rather. Institutional, of course, vote, protest, give money, donate money, buy things from small businesses that are Black, trans, and BIPOC owned. And on the more local level, I often find myself as the only gender expansive person in the room, which makes me feel that I'm at a deficit, and it's my responsibility to remember that I am not. It is still a great privilege to be the only gender expansive person in the room, and it's my responsibility that I not be the last one. And I constantly remind myself, no, be the difficult person, because it is a lot easier for a white person to be the difficult person than it would be for a BIPOC, trans, or gender expansive person to be the difficult person, and I don't want it to fall on my colleagues who are at more of a deficit than I perceive my deficit to be. And then on the personal level, seeing individuals and having actual friends who are living that experience, and listening and realizing that we were kind of talking about this backstage, no qualifier is a monolith, and everyone is an individual, and yes, of course, donate across the board, give your money to Black and brown organizations, and also get to know people as individuals and listen to what they need, because two people who are the same qualifiers don't have the same needs necessarily.
Exactly, and that's such an important point too, because people often kind of engage in what people refer to as maybe armchair activism of just I clicked on the PayPal, I'm done. And while, like you're saying, it's incredibly helpful, and I do need to eat today, there are so many other ways too. But Kim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just think that as someone walking around in a white skin suit that was kind of randomly assigned, that it's so easy for us to just go along with stuff, and we just have to find ways to not just go along, to draw that line between either being racist or being anti-racist, and find ways to be anti-racist. And God knows that in the arts there's plenty of opportunities for that, to break down systemic racism that we bump into every day. Especially in the more rarefied world of music, especially in the more probably rarefied world from there, world of opera. There are plenty of opportunities for us to do this every day at every level. So, for us as creators of the piece, we don't always have a say in who is going to be involved in particular productions. But, we make it as apparent as possible, and we've written, kind of a code of recommendations that we have for productions that involve casting not only BIPOC folks, but just gender expansive folks. Just lean on that as much as possible. That thing that I mentioned a little while ago about us describing different voice types instead of different genders of people to play roles is, that's not how we do it, is something that you often hear. And, we need to take it upon ourselves to be noisy and be troublesome and break rules and kind of force different ways to do it. Because that's what you hear quite a bit, is we just don't do it that way.
And just to double check, Kim, can you confirm, are you an Aquarius?
How did you know that?
Well, you're talking about breaking rules.
Oh, well, I'm Aquarius.
Very good, very good. And I agree, especially because when I'm in a position of leadership, in as much as I'm able, you know, I find myself, as Heather was saying, like, okay, I might be the only gender expansive person that this person knows or that this person will ever meet, potentially. And so at once, I feel like I have this very heavy responsibility until I realize that I have no interest playing into respectability politics of what I should be like or what I'm supposed to be like. I can only be as I am. And in order for me to be as I am, I need other people to recognize that too. And it sounds like we're putting our best foot forward by advocating for those who may otherwise not have the means or the voice to do so. Even by us, you know, in our relative, because we're all actually at, you know, we're ambitious, we're hardworking, we're doing the thing, but we're at different stages in our careers. And it could be quite nerve-wracking, especially for emerging artists or, you know, graduate students or maybe artistic professionals who have only recently transitioned to take that power that we inherently have. So it's up to not only us, but our dear allies to support us. And speaking of support, I want to remind everyone that this work is never truly done and that we do need so much support, not only kind of on the ground through kind of community organizing, through community-based fundraising, but also supporting programs like the American Opera Project that wants to expand what it means to be an artistic professional, that wants to expand the boundaries of what opera can look like and introduce almost all at once an entirely new infrastructure to support people who want to work in those communities. So in the same way that you have to donate to your kind of community-based organizations, either through time, resources, or financial capital, don't forget about your artistic institutions as well, because we need your help just as much. Speaking of artistic institutions, we have in the environment a very special guest, Francesca Zambellon. My degree wanted to jump out and do it anyway. Francesca Zambellon is here, and for those of you who do not know, she is the managing artistic director of Washington National Opera and Glimmer Glass Festival. Let's please invite her to the stage.
Very much. Can I sit here?
Please.
Can I be this close?
For you.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I insist.
We were in that room together before, so we're okay.
The secrets behind the curtain.
Great. Well, I am loving everything that I'm hearing, and I'm here to share some good news. May I start with that?
Please, we love good news.
Okay, great. Okay, I did not print it out because I just came from Washington, even though I also live around the corner. But first of all, I want to say it's a pleasure to be here with everybody tonight. I'm honored. I'm here representing the Washington National Opera, where I am the artistic director at the Kennedy Center, and we are thrilled about what I'm going to tell you about in 1 second, which is totally in line with everything that you've all been talking about. The Washington National Opera has had, I've been had the honor to be in that position for a decade there, and I'm very proud of the fact that we have worked very hard on many, many different kinds of programs, specifically ones that, you know, work towards better diversity on stage, diversity in who we use as creators, because it does often come from the material, and of course staffing. And as you can imagine, the Kennedy Center has an amazing set of resources with it, but also there is a lot of administrative bureaucratic side of it. We have two programs there that I'm very proud of. One of them is called the American Opera Initiative, and that's has basically the idea behind that is to support emerging composers and librettists. And over 10 years in its existence, we've launched something like 40 new operas. They're short, usually they're 20 minutes to an hour, and everybody, all the teams, we do 3 teams a year, work with major librettists and composers. And so I'm thrilled, of course, that they have gotten to work with Laura, Mark, and that Kimberly is one of the mentors this year as well for the works we have coming up. The other big part of an opera company like that is we have something called a Young Artist Program. I'm sure for anybody who goes to the opera, you know that every single opera company has a Young Artist Program. And it's generally a place where, I always think it's slightly a misnomer because they're not really young. They're not like they're 16. They're usually like 28, and they've gone through some major training. Their instrument is fully in place. And they often are doing roles in the company, and we particularly focus a lot on doing new music with them, because I think that's so important, is that I love Mozart and I love Beethoven and I love Wagner, but I also love what we don't know yet. Mm-hmm. And it's our job to figure out what that means. So with these 2 things in mind, these 2 parts of our company, this wonderful group of creators came to myself and Rob Ainsley, who is the director of our Young Artist Program and New Works, with an idea which we have latched onto, which is to make something called the True Voice Award. This is going to be an award that will be given annually, and it will be given to a singer who identifies as transgender or non-binary, and who shows promise for a successful operatic career. This gift is driven by this team, and we are in full support of it, and of course are enhancing it. It's not just the Washington National Opera, but also the trustees of the company are behind this. And so this is a major kind of step that we are going to be starting this award this coming year. The prize will basically be a cash prize, plus a chance to be with the company and work with the company, all of our coaches and everything, for a certain amount of time, and will end in some sort of performance opportunity. And so the True Voice Award, I'm thrilled that we're doing it. Who knows where it's going to lead in the next few years, the same way when you wrote As One, who knew where that was going to end up. But I think that this is, if I may say, I'm hoping it's kind of like, the Good Housekeeping seal of approval a little bit. If I may say, I think it puts it, I hope, in the mainstream in a way that is so important. I don't mean to be flip about it, but I think that's important. And I think that, being in an august institution and having that kind of recognition is very important. The selection for that artist will be led by Rob Ainsley, who runs the Young Artist Program, as well as all of our music staff. And I'm thrilled that we're going to be doing it, and it's going to start, they'll get all the regular coaching that you get in this kind of program. And when you all were talking about figuring out voices, I think that's a big part of it, is what is the repertory going to be? These are big questions. That's like not just for this panel. We could have another discussion about that, right? But so part of it is going to be training those voices, but also, as we look to our future with the American Opera Initiative, this coming season we have just awarded a transgender librettist and, I don't want to make a mistake here, non-binary composer, and commissioned them for a new work, who you will be mentoring them. And so I'm thrilled that it's not just about the voice, it's also about the material and creating more material. So we're very honored at the Washington National Opera that you came with this suggestion and that we've managed to put it together. We appreciate very much your help with it, and we're very honored to do it. So that's all I have to say. I'm not going to go on and on. Thank you very much, everybody out there. Come see us at the Kennedy Center. I'm going to go back down to my hut seat down there unless anybody has any questions about this.
I actually do have one question for you.
I knew you would. I felt that when we were back in that room talking together.
I wonder, it's such, as you're saying, and as we're undoubtedly all feeling, like what an amazing boon that a major American cultural institution is not simply saying, oh yes, we like this, but doing the hard thing of actually putting those resources into the hands of the people who deserve it the most.
Yeah.
I wonder, can you share some of your thoughts though? What are some of the inherent challenges of an award like this? Because certainly it's one thing to have a desire to kind of bring that diversity to the stage or to an institution, but what happens when an institution doesn't have the infrastructure to support that diversity? And instead, community members are invited and maybe at different levels subject to harm or violence even.
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the reasons that we've made the commitment for the first few years that it not be a whole year process, but that it be a condensed amount of time, like within a month, and that it ends with the performance, was so that we could do it well. I think, you've got to be really, having, at this point in life, produced literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of operas, don't do something if you don't think you can do it really well. And I think that with something like this, okay, this is just completely uncharted territory for a more conventional opera company. Mm-hmm. And I don't want it to be like it's a big press thing or blah, blah, blah. I want it to be a well thought out participation and learning experience so that the artist, I think, gains a great deal from it. And then when you talk about, obviously, things about safety and that, I think all of us in the arts, no matter what we're doing, are often under attack in many different ways. So I think we'll do our best, the same way we do always, to protect our community. And to, it's our job as our community to watch over each other, but also to reach out to as many people who do not think like we do. And I think that's our daily job.
Absolutely. That's
what I think about every day when I get up. So I hope that's helpful.
My dear friends, a round of applause for Francesca.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, they had the idea. We just made it happen.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so thank you. And thank you so much. It's just really such a pleasure and an honor to be together and to sort of connect with everybody. So thank you. I'm going to go back down there, and at a certain point I'm going to have to slip out to a performance, but I'm really, really thrilled about this. And I hope that everybody will come to Washington next season when we present something. Okay? All right? All right.
Thank you.
I also just want to say that, Laura, Mark, and I have certainly had conversations about finding the best springboard for the True Voice Award in hopes that it will inspire other opera companies to establish with their young artist programs more programs like this with the Good Housekeeping seal of approval.
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to highlight is how Francesca talked about doing things right. And, this production as one, it does so many things right. It manages to take a deeply personal story, but with universal themes. And that's difficult for any genre, but especially in opera, where the contemporary audience member may not have even been to one. They still expect to see horns and, a very specific type of thing. And as much as it's important for us to look to As One and initiatives like the True Voice Award to identify their successes, I think it's also important that we hold up that magnifying glass a bit longer and also identify some of the missteps along the way. And while no one work, as you mentioned earlier, is necessarily should be a cultural monolith to stand in for all things all the time, I'm interested, what are some of the missteps you find in As One, 8 years from, 8 years, since its original conception, and what are some of those missteps in particular that you feel that other companies or audience members, when they engage this work, need to be aware of?
I'll jump in on that. Wow, 8 years. In some ways, that seems very, very, very short time. some ways it seems like a long time since that's happened, but regardless of how long that has been, I think it's always, appropriate to take a look back and see these things. I wish we would have started the True Voice Award earlier, because I think one of the things that we realized telling a story about trans folks is that there just wasn't this huge roster of trans singers that had been prepared, that had just the possibility of going through training, whether, as you mentioned so wisely earlier, that maybe it's even a process of self-selection. Maybe folks feel like, if I do transition, it's going to change my voice, and my voice is the thing that I know, and I can't change that because that's how I get work. And building that network of training, I wish we would have done it earlier. I also, it caught us by surprise. I mean, this was Laura and my first foray into opera, and the fact that 8 years later we've ended up with 50 productions, I think surprised us quite a bit. We didn't ever see that this was where it was going to go so quickly. So perhaps we need to cut ourselves a bit of a break. But I think that that's the one big thing I would change.
I want to speak to the vocal writing, just since I've sung the mezzo-soprano part and I'm going to be performing the baritone part in the fall. What I would love to see in the future well, first of all, they wrote this piece in 2014 in the traditional operatic way for mezzo-soprano and baritone. And what I would love to see in the future for pieces like this is similar to what they are doing. What's the name of the opera? The new one, the Hometown?
Oh, Hometown to the World.
Hometown to the World, where you're writing for an instrument and you indicate the vocal ranges. Another thing I'd love to see in the future, even in a piece like As One, when you go and you look at the vocal score and you see the range, you're like, okay, it's from here to here. I would also love to see like osias, like maybe I don't have the high Q, but I can sing a high X, and have like a couple different options for the really like juicy parts of the opera on either extreme of the voice. Because with transgender singers, if we're transitioning, our voices are changing. It's not that our voices are subpar. I want to say that and make that very clear. It's not that we're less talented. It's that our voices are in transition. They're young voices. And so being able to pick and choose what you sing at the top or bottom of the staff is really important. Another thing that composers can do in the future is, for the big hit number, offer one or two different keys that it could be in. Some pieces that will work in, some pieces that's harder to do, but I wanted to put out those two options of osias and transpositions in opera. And it's not a new idea, I also want to point out.
Yeah, well, because as any singer knows, the 24 or 26 Italian arias, they come in every key under the sun.
Oh my God, that's all I sang for 3 months while I was retraining.
Did you have a favorite?
No.
None of them.
Heather.
I want to give a momentary shout out. Speaking of, you brought up the Italian songs and arias. A wonderful trans singer and colleague of ours, Aidan Feldkamp, has curated an anthology of trans. Well, what's the title of it? I'm blanking. It's like basically 24 Italian songs and arias for trans voices, which is huge and wonderful, and everyone should go buy it. And it's all art songs by queer and trans and non-binary people, and that is how we get more trans and non-binary singers, is we offer music for them to sing.
It's a fantastic collection.
And it's blue and pink on the cover, which we love. Back to As One. For me, my experience of the storytelling, there were two things that I was able to like sing into and also felt far away from. One being Norway, so the whole third part of the show is Hannah after goes to Norway and like finds herself in a really beautiful like it spoke to me in such an amazing way, and it was a gift that I had during the pandemic of just not being perceived and being able to like be alone and just determine who you are without the world telling you who you are. So I was able to connect to that, and I also recognized that like for someone to go to Norway would mean that they would need a lot of disposable income. And also I spend a lot of time in like the outdoors, and I know that a black or brown person like camping in the wilderness would not be safe in Norway as much as a white person would be. And so that was a moment of like, this is beautiful. I recognize that like what a gift this would be and what a gift this is for this character to go on this journey, and also how it could be alienating for people for whom that would never be able to be a financial or logistical reality. And then the other big moment that I could really sink into and felt distance from was the attack scene in As One, which I could relate to it. I could relate to the emotions of it. And then at the same time, there was a parallel experience of me performing being assaulted, and my stage direction was basically like, no, do it bigger, do it bigger. And I had to sit down and say like, well, when I was assaulted, this is how I reacted to it. And I actually did this. And if I did what you're asking on stage, I wouldn't be able to sing, which is probably more important. And so that was a tricky dance of like, I want to honor this, but also like, this is a lot to ask me to relive something, or at least access something that was so painful in order to tell a painful story and do it justice. But also honor my own boundaries as a performer and a person.
I think that was beautifully said, and I mean, all of your perspectives thus far, especially because when we consider the out of nowhere in As One, it is, for those who are unfamiliar with the show, accompanied by a list of names of trans women in particular who have faced violence kind of globally. And it's an extremely difficult passage to work through for the mezzo-soprano, who is in the rafters and in the basement vocally, not to mention the intense kind of personal journey. But the reading of the names falls on the baritone and is conceived differently in each production by the stage director. And in my performances, because my performance of As One in November 2021 was, I think, my 7th or 8th. So I've done it quite a few times, most of which were in 2018 and 19, but then again in 2021. It was always very difficult. And I often wondered, who is this for? This particular scene, this particular moment and its intensity, who benefits from seeing this? And a question I would pose for future composers and future kind of makers of our artistic reality is that question. Who is this for? And what are the inherent risks in including something that can be so dramatically violent that it's impossible for someone in the audience to continue viewing, let alone a performer to continue singing? It's difficult. And I think part of why it's so difficult now is because, as Kim said, 8 years is such a short amount of time, but what a long 8 years it's been. And to parallel that, I'd like to share something. In addition to working as a professional performing artist, I also work as a music educator at the Baltimore School for the Arts. And if any of my students are watching, I miss you very much. And when I was a student at the Baltimore School, and I also went to the Baltimore School for the Arts, some time ago, because my students don't know how old I am, and you're not finding out now either. But when I was a student, I did not have access to the words gender expansive, or agender, or even non-binary. And instead, I called myself undefined. Thankfully, I was popular, I wasn't bullied, but my friends would always be like, undefined. And From then to now, I swear to you, it seems 60% of my students use a second pronoun. And we have a very strong student activism presence. And it's as amazing as it is emotional to think that in such a short amount of time, relatively, this next generation of scholars and artists and policymakers and community members is answering a call before we've even dialed the phone, you know? And in order for them to experience something like As One, in order to experience, and because I think the idea, right, is that As One is this beautiful thing, and we need more beautiful things like it. In order for them to experience something like it, we have to work so hard to create sound infrastructure, something that's grounded in mutual support and community organization, one that boasts its support but doesn't brag, one that is secure in itself but knows that it's forever a lifelong learner. And no matter how many As Ones are produced or how many As Ones we see, people should always keep that in mind, that even as we up here as industry professionals speak our minds, we're learning too, you know? And I want to return to an earlier point that Heather made. Hi, Heather. You mentioned that you're today debuting, calling yourself agender, and I'm happy to have had a little part of that. Yes. But for those who may not know, what is this distinction that you're making between non-binary and agender, and what are those implications?
Absolutely. My journey was kind of like picking whatever terms already existed so that I didn't confuse people, really. It was like more about, it's like more about being perceived than it is about finding the exact right. It's like whatever makes sense to other people, that I don't have to like open a book and like read a litany of things about myself. Whatever can be just a shortcut. And that was non-binary at the time. And since then, only a few years ago, non-binary has become, feels like it has kind of become a third gender, which is not what I'm going for. What makes me so happy is to unsubscribe from the concept of gender, and agender really speaks to that to me in a way that non-binary kind of has become its own camp of like, well, I'm not male, I'm not female, I'm not binary. Like, okay, well, that's not it either. Is there a way to have a term for a group that communicates that everyone is an individual? I don't know. Maybe that's kind of maybe that's kind of an oxymoron in itself.
No, but I really like what you're saying, which is to say that, agender literally means without. And for those who like Latin, it forces us to reconcile what that means. I am not this thing or this thing, a combination thereof, but it is inherently gender here in this corporeal form that you find so stunning is not here. And that's something that even within our communities, and not just the trans community, but I mean just like professional communities and our family circles and the people we ride the bus with, like even if we agree to an extent, there's always these branches. And I feel like in order to see the whole tree, we have to acknowledge the branch first, right? I want to begin asking about ways that we can maybe, as audience members, more directly kind of keep up with you and check in with you about upcoming projects. So can you share, what are you up to next? Tell us. And I promise I'll go at the end. Kim, you're first.
As Francesca mentioned, I'm a mentor for the American Opera Initiative, which, as she also said, has a trans and non-binary team, which I'm very excited about. Working with Laura Kaminsky and I, have an opera coming up at Town Hall here in New York City in November 5th at Town Hall, which I'm very excited about. And I'm working on some film stuff, and hopefully some more productions of As One that we'll be at, some of which are very excited. There's another production at Opera Steamboat that has an all-trans cast and almost all of the crew as well. So we're very excited about that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kim. Lucas, how about you?
I can piggyback off of that. I'm part of the As One production with Opera Steamboat in September, and I'm really looking forward to that. In addition to that, I'm working with American Opera Projects and students at NYU Tisch Opera Lab, and we're doing a bunch of new short operas about reproductive rights, and they're going to be really amazing in May. I'm also singing with Chamber Queer, a really wonderful organization for queer musicians here in New York. In June for Pride Month, and I'm really honored. I'm singing in 2 different productions of Mozart's Don Giovanni. I'm singing the role of Mazzetto and later Leporello.
A double bill.
Yes.
And Heather, how about you?
I am doing a lot of concerts coming up. I wrote them down. There's a Bach St. John Passion in Brooklyn that's happening in the next couple weeks. A Verdi Requiem that's happening on the Upper East Side next week. Bach B minor Mass around the corner from here later in March. And a new opera by Matthew Aucoin. How do you say? Is that Aucoin?
Aucoin.
I've only seen it written, and I really wanted it to be Aucoin. With Opera Fayetteville, I'm returning to Opera Fayetteville to sing in that amazing dystopian American opera. And then I'll be joining the Spoleto Festival USA for several concerts in my hometown, Charleston, South Carolina.
And do you hear? For those of you who are watching, understand what this means. Now you know. We're here and available for hire.
And there's more than just us here.
And there's
there
more
are many more.
Yes.
than just us. We are but a beautifully presented sliver of an even more beautiful community of artists and artistic professionals who are ready and able and eager, I think, to perform for you and alongside you and with you too. Up next for me, after I finish moderating this panel discussion this evening, I'm returning to Baltimore to perform, but I'm using my voice in a new way, more oration-based. I'll be participating in Rise, Be More, which is an annual concert conceived by composer and theorist Judah Adashi. And it is a free evening of words and music and dance and art in celebration and in commemoration of the life of Freddie Gray, who was unjustly killed in Baltimore in 2015. And then later, I put on my capital C composer hat, and I'll be acting as a composer in residence for the Music at St. David's concert series. And I'm especially happy, not only because I'll be able to, create new secular and sacred works, but because, again, we deserve to be able to have not just a seat at the table, but the table is ours, and we built it with our own hands. And in order to do that, sometimes we chop down the tree ourselves, but sometimes I need to borrow the proverbial cup of sugar, or I guess an axe. My dear friends, it has been such a pleasure to share this time with you. I'd like to welcome formally, for all of your consideration, librettist and filmmaker Kimberly Reed, baritone Lucas Bouk, and mezzo-soprano Heather Jones. Again, my name is Rahzé Cheatham, and on your digital program, you'll see a link to all of our websites if you care to read a little bit more about us. In the interim, be well, and with every good wish, have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you.
true.